It happened on a Tuesday, which feels wrong somehow. You'd think the end of the world would come on a Friday night. Something cinematic. Thunder, fire, a musical cue. But no, it was a Tuesday, the kind of day you forget unless the sky decides to split in half. Shanghai was the first. 1 second people were scrolling their feeds. The next they were staring straight up into hell. Not fire, not clouds, but this pressure in the air, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Then came the crack, a sound that didn't just hit your ears, it rattled your bones. Like metal screaming underwater. That's how folks described it later. Like God had taken a crowbar to the atmosphere. And then the ships came through. Not one or two, hundreds, big enough to block out sunlight. Smooth, obsidian curves lined with veins of flickering light. No wings, no engines. Just this impossible grace, like they were born to fly in our sky. People ran, people filmed, people died. And the rest of the world? Berlin lost power 30 seconds after Shanghai. Kansas went dark 3 minutes later. London, Tokyo, Nairobi, Sao Paulo, all swallowed in silence. Global blackout. In 6 hours flat. We thought it was an invasion. We were wrong. It was a handover. The broadcast came next. Every screen, every speaker, hijacked like they owned it, like they'd always owned it. The voice was wrong, not alien in the way we imagined, not screeching or booming, just off. Perfect pronunciation, no emotion, like it had learned to speak from a corporate manual. Attention, inhabitants of Earth, you have been acquired. Your species has been integrated into the Vol Dominion. People thought it was a joke, a viral campaign, some prank, because what else could it be? Then came the truth. Turns out, some of our leaders knew. Not the kind you vote for, the kind whose names you never hear. They had made a deal, a cold, calculated, cutthroat deal. They knew Earth wouldn't survive another 100 years. Climate collapse, dwindling resources, the same song we'd been dancing to for decades. So they sold us out. In exchange for safe passage off-world, for a few 100,000 elites, they handed us over to the Vol. They packaged humanity like a product and slapped a tag on it. Sold to the highest bidder. We weren't invaded. We were delivered. The rest of us? The 7 billion not on the guest list? We were leftovers. Scrap. Useful only if compliant. The Vol wasted no time. They didn't blast us with lasers. No fire raining from the sky. They were smarter than that. They shut us down. Completely. Satellites fell from orbit like dead birds. GPS went silent. Communications crashed. Electricity? Gone. Our weapons? Useless. Anything networked or automated blinked out. Fighter jets dropped from the sky. Drones crashed like toys. We were back in the dark, while they walked among us with eyes like suns. And the worst part? We didn't even fight back at first. We froze. Because how do you fight something that didn't come here to destroy you, but to own you? I remember the footage. It was everywhere before the blackout. People on rooftops, families huddled in basements, first responders doing what they could with whatever they had. And then the silence hit. No news, no help, no hope. But something strange happened in that silence. Something beautiful. It started small. An old man in Detroit pulled a generator out of his garage and started handing out coffee and batteries. A mechanic named Alvarez rewired a school bus into a rolling fortress and called it God's mistake. Because if God made us, and we made this, yeah, mistake tracks. In the hills of Afghanistan, tribes that hadn't spoken in years started coordinating. No cell towers, no radios, just word of mouth and ancient smoke signals. In South Africa, school children began planting community gardens with leftover rainwater tanks and scavenged seed packs. The world was cracking, but we weren't collapsing. Not all of us. Because humans, man, we're weird. We can be soft and cruel and stupid and selfish. But corner us? Strip away the comfort? We snap. Yeah, but we also ignite. We build. We fight. We adapt. And the Vol? They'd studied our systems, our weapons, our politics. But they'd never studied our soul. They thought they'd beaten us in 6 hours. But they forgot to count rage. They forgot to count grief. They forgot what happens when you take everything from a species that has nothing left to lose. So yeah, it happened on a Tuesday. But by Thursday, we were already fighting back. Not with missiles. Not yet. With will. With spit. With fists and torches and traps made from kitchen blenders and broken dreams. We were broken. Yeah, but broken things cut deeper. And we were just getting started. You know that feeling when everything familiar suddenly turns alien? When your home doesn't feel like home, and every shadow looks like it's watching you? That was Earth. The day after the takeover. No lights, no internet, no answers. Just this low hum in the air, constant, like the planet was holding its breath. And above us, those massive Vol ships hanging in the sky like tombstones. They didn't even move. They just sat there, watching, reminding us who was in charge. For the first few days, we were stunned, like a boxer who just took a hit and didn't know which way the ring went. People looted because they didn't know what else to do. Hospitals ran out of power. Shelves emptied. Some prayed. Some drank. Some curled up and waited for the knock that never came. But see, here's the part the Vol never got. We don't stay down. They thought we were done, that shutting off the grid meant they'd broken us. What they didn't realize was that humans are the most stubborn things in the galaxy. We survive everything. Famines, plagues, bombs, bad breakups, you name it. And now we had a common enemy. It started in pockets, quiet ones. Detroit was one of the first. In a warehouse full of rusted car parts and old tools, a crew of out-of-work factory workers built something insane. A Frankenstein of armor plates, steel mesh, and propane tanks. They welded it onto a school bus, painted God's mistake in blood red across the side. That thing looked like it wanted to punch God in the mouth. Then you had the Siberian Choir. Ex-cons, smugglers, and soldiers turned farmers. When a Vol Scout drone came nosing around, they didn't hide. They shot it down with nothing but bear traps and car batteries. Boom. One Vol drone down. First confirmed kill. And suddenly hope. Hope's a funny thing. It spreads like fire when you've got nothing left to lose. In Lagos, a retired radio DJ named FUA turned her old broadcasting gear into a makeshift resistance channel. She didn't have a transmitter, but she had voice. She screamed into the silence. No plan, just raw fury. If you're out there, if you can hear me, we're still here. We don't die quiet. Her message bounced around the ruins on old analog frequencies. Some picked it up on broken ham radios. Others swore they heard it in static between songs on ancient cassette decks. People started scribbling, "We don't die quiet," on walls, on shirts, on the backs of their hands. It became a war cry. And speaking of war, let's talk about Red. Nobody knew her real name. Just Red. Probably because of the hair or the blood. She was ex-military, discharged, dishonored. Didn't matter. She watched her entire neighborhood in Portland get wiped by an energy sweep. Her little sister was outside, running to grab a stuffed animal. One blink, gone. Red didn't cry. She didn't scream. She built. She found survivors, trained them, fed them, drilled them like they were gearing up for World War X. And then she did the impossible. She hit a Vol supply skimmer. They expected her to run. She charged, used scrap bombs, mirror tricks, old smoke grenades, and a truck filled with fertilizer. The Vol didn't even know what hit them. That was the birth of the Ragline. Ragline wasn't an army, not in the traditional sense. No uniforms, no ranks, no permission. It was chaos. Glorious, feral chaos. Doctors, gamers, ex-cons, grandmothers who knew how to boil poison from their gardens. If you could hold a wrench, shoot a gun, swing a bat, you were in. Tarek, an engineer from Aleppo, figured out how to fry Vol sensors with modified solar panels. Jonah, a 17-year-old from Sydney, hacked a grounded Vol pod with nothing but a busted console and a ridiculous amount of Mountain Dew. We didn't have leaders. We had legends. And legends spread like wildfire. The Vol weren't prepared. They expected structure, patterns, something they could predict. What they got was complete and utter madness. Booby traps in alleyways, hacked vending machines that sprayed acid, whole towns that looked abandoned until the ambush. In India, a fake surrender turned into a 1,000-person ambush using only ropes, oil, and firecrackers. In Mexico, a mariachi band used their instruments to mask the sound of a power core overload. It blew a hole in a transport the size of a stadium. And every time we hit back, even a little, we left a mark on their tech, on their pride. Because here's the thing. The Vol weren't used to fear. They were used to obedience. Clean, efficient, polite surrender. We gave them none of that. We gave them nightmares. Of course, we paid the price. Every victory cost blood. Every win came with screams. Families torn apart. Whole cities lost. But something shifted. Not in us. In them. They started hesitating, pulling back patrols, armoring their skimmers more heavily. Because now, Earth wasn't just a prize. It was a problem. And as the weeks crawled on, the resistance grew teeth. We didn't rebuild civilization. We built weapons. Communities built around survival and defiance. Underground bunkers linked with hand-delivered messages. Kids became scouts. Elders became tacticians. If you had breath, you had purpose. And if you could kill a Vol, you were a damn hero. We weren't organized. We weren't ready, but we were angry. And in the ruins of our old world, that anger became something bigger, not just survival, not just revenge, resistance. Because the Vol may have taken our power, our skies, our leaders, but they forgot one very important thing. We don't die quiet. The Vol studied everything, our history, our power grids, even our languages. They mapped our world down to the shadows under our feet. But for all their tech, they still missed the most dangerous part of humanity. The ones who don't give a damn about rules. The outliers. The broken. The forgotten. The people who slip through cracks so small they disappear entirely. Until the day they explode from those cracks like fire through a gas line. That's who the Vol missed. Take Red, for example. She didn't just go rogue. She went feral. The more structured we fell apart, the more she thrived. Her unit, if you could even call it that, was like a traveling thunderstorm. She showed up, burned through a Vol outpost, and vanished like smoke. They tried tracking her. She hacked their trackers. They tried bribing locals. She fed those locals. She built loyalty out of fire and fury. And she wasn't alone. In the caves of northern Pakistan, a retired teacher named Haroon taught kids how to reload rifles using nothing but muscle memory and old steel parts. They called him Uncle Boom. He taught history by candlelight and war by firelight. One day, a Vol patrol walked into his mountain village. 10 went in. None came out. They didn't even find the weapons. Just quiet huts, warm smiles, and something that smelled like sulfur in the breeze. Then there was Tariq. The man was a genius and a wreck, both in equal measure. He'd seen too much war, lost too many people. Syria, Iraq, Yemen. He'd been through it all before the stars even cracked. When the Vol shut down Earth's satellites, Tariq looked up and said, "Good, now they can't watch us." He built EMP mines using blender motors and wire stripped from lamp cords. He fried a Vol walker just by hiding a copper coil inside a generator and baiting them with a heat signal. He wasn't flashy. He was lethal. Down in Australia, Jonah was just a kid, 17, skinny, ADHD that could have powered a small city. He found a dead Vol scout ship in the outback. Everyone else saw wreckage. Jonah saw a project. He dragged it back to his family's shed, tore it apart, and rebuilt it using spare parts from tractors, lawnmowers, and a 90s-era gaming rig. Used a pair of VR goggles as a neural interface. And then he did what no one else had managed to do. He got it online. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough to tap into the Vol's comms network. The first message he sent, "Oops, looks like your toaster's angry." The second, "Humanity says hi." These were the people the Vol missed. The weirdos, the makers, the kids who couldn't sit still, the old folks who remembered war like it was family, the angry, the brilliant, the half-broken. And when word started spreading about them, through whispers, through static, through stories scrawled in chalk on ruins, something changed. They stopped being individuals. They became hope. The Vol tried adapting. They started deploying cleaners, sleek, emotionless bots that incinerated anything suspicious. Cities, towns, even forests. But the cleaners had a flaw. They couldn't adapt. Humans could. So the resistance used that. We baited them with mannequins rigged with explosives. Sent them chasing decoy radio signals through old subway tunnels. Whole squads of cleaners disappeared into caverns filled with gas and came out in pieces. If they came out at all, we weren't fighting a war the way they understood war. This wasn't lines and tactics. This was mischief weaponized. One group in Brazil figured out how to reflect Vol targeting lasers using shattered windshields. Another in Japan used ancient bamboo forests as tripwire labyrinths. The resistance was no longer reacting. We were creating. And the more chaos we caused, the more their command structure fractured. Because the Vol weren't used to failure. Not like we are. They didn't know how to process it. They treated setbacks like corrupted files. Just delete and move on. But we treated every failure like a lesson. Missed ambush? Change the route. Botched signal? Try smoke. Lost a crew? Build a statue. Name a battle after them. And fight harder tomorrow. Every loss made us meaner. And it wasn't just fighters. Artists started painting resistance murals on broken walls. Massive, defiant images of human fists crushing alien tech. Kids learned how to pick locks and code tripwires. Grandmas started teaching knife skills between baking lessons. Humanity wasn't just resisting. We were evolving. The Vol didn't just miss a few rebels. They missed everyone we could become. Because here's what they never saw coming. We never fight alone. We fight with ghosts, with ancestors, with every story passed down over fire and song and blood. You take one of us, you piss off 1,000 more. And when that wave finally rises, it doesn't stop, it crashes. You ever feel the moment before a storm breaks? That stillness, that eerie quiet, like the world is holding its breath, and you know, deep down, you're about to lose something. That was Earth, the morning before Black Point fell. Black Point wasn't big, just another half-dead mining town on the edge of Nevada. Population maybe 1,300 before the vault came. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where secrets are loud and grudges grow old. Dusty roads, rusted trailers, bar fights on Fridays, forgotten by the world until we needed it. Because underneath all that cracked dirt and old asphalt, Black Point had tunnels, miles of them, old mining shafts, long abandoned. And someone got the bright idea to turn those shafts into bunkers, then those bunkers into weapon forges, and then those weapon forges into the beating heart of a resistance cell bigger than the Vol ever expected. We called it Ember Post, and the Vol wanted it gone. The warning came at dawn, not from satellites, not from radar. We didn't have those anymore. It came from eyes on a rooftop and a cracked pair of binoculars, duct taped to hell. They're coming, the boys said. 13, maybe 14. Covered in desert dust, face half burned from an old blast. Didn't even blink. What's coming? Red asked, not looking up. He didn't answer. He just pointed. And when Red climbed up to see what he saw, the wind died. The hairs on her arms stood straight. On the horizon, black shapes, dozens of them, moving in formation, shimmering, angular, graceful in that sick vault way. Like birds made of death, cleaner drones. And walking beside them, something worse. Not just metal, not just synthetic. These ones moved like they knew pain, like they remembered it. Vol shock troopers, infantry, real boots-on-ground monsters. Black Point had ours, maybe. And Red? She didn't flinch. She jumped down from the roof and barked out one word that lit up every survivor's spine like lightning. Burnline. Burnline wasn't a retreat plan. It was a funeral, a last-stand protocol built by madmen, loaded with everything they swore they'd never use unless it was the end. Tunnels wired with fire traps, explosive-laced walls, Molotov drones, old Earth chemical weapons from bunkers no government admitted existed. They didn't care about war crimes anymore, not when extinction was on the table. You pull the burn line, and you don't expect to walk away. You expect to hurt them so bad they remember your name in nightmares. In the last hour before the Vol arrived, Ember Post became something else. Quiet, focused, beautiful in the ugliest way. Families didn't cry. They passed ammo. Kids didn't hide. They took up knives. Engineers worked with grease-stained hands, rigging traps out of microwaves and car batteries. Old women handed out pieces of paper with hand-scrawled prayers and the names of the fallen. And Red? She strapped explosives to her chest and kissed a photo of her sister. "We don't get to die easy," she whispered. "We get to make it count." When the first Vol Scout stepped onto Black Point soil, the sky cracked. Thunder, real thunder, shook the earth. Because someone, somewhere, still had access to a working rail cannon. Only one shot left. They used it on that first squad. Obliterated. Just dust and metal teeth. The Vol paused. We didn't. The battle didn't start. It erupted. Ember Post spewed fire from its veins. Tunnels lit up like veins of lava. Traps went off in sequence. Boom, boom, boom. Each blast echoing through the mountains like a heartbeat. Vol armor melted under homemade acid bombs. Their drones crashed into signal jammers and spun straight into walls. Snipers used mirrors to bounce shots around corners. Teenagers with slingshots aimed for sensors, not heads. Every move was desperation sharpened into genius. And the Vol? For the first 5 minutes, they thought it was chaos. Then they realized it was strategy. Human strategy. The kind born from too much pain and not enough time. But pain has a limit. And the Vol were relentless. They sent impulse sweepers. The kind that wiped electronics with a low hum and a blue flash. Our traps failed. Lights died. The forge silenced. And still, no one ran. Red stood at the heart of Ember Post, clutching a detonator made from a toaster switch and a prayer. Her fingers shook, but her eyes didn't blink. "We fall," she said into the last working speaker, "but we don't fall small." Then she hit the switch, and Black Point screamed. The explosion wasn't just big. It was personal. The kind that carries names in the flames. The kind that leaves scars in orbit. The kind that says, "You may kill us, but you won't forget us." Satellite debris rained from the sky for hours. Ash blanketed the desert like snow. The crater where Emberpost used to be glowed for 3 days straight. The Vol pulled back, not because we beat them, but because we showed them the cost. And then something wild happened. News of Blackpoint spread, not through comms, not through networks, through people, on foot, on bikes, on horseback, old-fashioned, mouth-to-mouth storytelling. And wherever the story went, it brought fire. Groups rose up, calling themselves Ashborn. In honor of the ones who lit the match and didn't flinch, they wore scorched bandanas and carried pieces of burnt rebar as clubs. Every one of them knew this fight wasn't for survival anymore. It was legacy. See, the Vol could beat us in a fight, but how do you kill a story? How do you kill a name whispered by dying lips into the ears of angry children? You don't. You just run out of time. And Red? She didn't die. At least, not then. A farmer found her 6 miles from the blast, half buried under rock, ribs shattered, eyes full of fire. She didn't say a word for 3 days. And then, on the 4th morning, she whispered, Round 2, Round 2. The next phase of the war didn't start with weapons. It started with echoes. Echoes of fire, of thunder, of people who stared down extinction and chose to burn instead of bow. And those echoes? They traveled. They grew. They called to us. Because humanity has this strange little glitch in our code. You push us to the edge, we jump, but not down. Forward, there's a moment in every war where the bullets stop being the loudest thing. Not because they're quiet, but because something else starts to scream louder. Sometimes it's grief, sometimes it's rage, and sometimes it's the sound of a people remembering they were never meant to stay quiet in the first place. This chapter, this is about the noise we made. After Blackpoint, everything changed. Not tactically, strategically, we were still screwed 6 ways from Sunday. No power grid, no global command, weapons running low, water even lower. But mentally, spiritually, something cracked open, like a match dragged across the soul of the planet. People didn't just resist anymore. They howled. You could feel it in the air, static, thick, electric. The kind of buzz that used to come before a riot or a thunderstorm. It didn't matter where you were. A burned-out skyscraper in Chicago, a jungle shack in Peru, an old fishing boat floating off what used to be Norway. Wherever you were, if you were human, you felt it, like the earth itself was growling in your bones. The Vol noticed too. Their patrols got tighter. Drones flew lower, faster, more erratic. They weren't scouting anymore. They were hunting. Problem was, they were hunting in the middle of a pack of animals that had finally remembered they had teeth. Let me tell you about Station 9. That was what the Resistance called it. The Vol called it Grid Node 17 Zeta. Just a squat black box on the outskirts of Old Geneva. No windows, no life. But inside, that box ran half of the Vol's signal processing in Western Europe. Nobody thought it was hittable. Guarded by sentries with armor that laughed at bullets. Drones overhead. Auto turrets that could shoot a fly off your ear mid-blink. We hit it anyway, because we're human, and we hate being told no. The strike team was 12 people. That's it, 12 souls, most of them barely trained. 2 were mechanics. 1 was a poet who'd never fired a gun before. And leading them, a one-eyed rebel named Sala who walked like every step was a dare. Their gear? Rope, homemade flash bombs, a laptop held together with prayer and duct tape. 1 hacked Vol drone that barely worked. They called it Sparky. The plan? Simple. Be loud, be fast, be gone. They approached under the cover of a thunderstorm, real thunder this time, not the metaphor kind. Rain hammering the ruins, lightning turning night into strobe light. Perfect cover. Sparky went first, glitching and wheezing like a drunk seagull. It zipped into the node and immediately shorted out a power junction. Boom, darkness. And that's when the noise started. Sala screamed, not out of fear, but like a goddamn war horn. She ran straight at the gate, firing wildly, knowing it wouldn't do much. But it wasn't about killing. It was about distracting. While the Vol focused on her, on that noise, the others slipped in through a service pipe. They climbed, crawled, bled, and when they reached the core, they planted everything they had. Old C4, homemade charges. 1 guy even strapped a propane tank to a timer and said, "Let's see what physics has to say about this." They set the charges, whispered a goodbye to whatever gods they still believed in, and ran. Only 5 made it out. But Station 9? Gone. Turned into a crater that still smokes today. And the message? Clear. You can silence our networks, shut down our cities, kill our leaders, but you will never shut us up. After Station 9, the noise got louder. People started blasting music from rooftops. Not just any music, old protest songs, metal, punk, tribal drums, anything with teeth. If you flew a drone over a human-held zone, you didn't hear silence. You heard rage. In Germany, someone hacked a Vol PA system and played Beethoven's Ode to Joy on loop for 4 straight hours while launching fireworks made from pipe bombs and spark plugs. In India, a network of resistance runners used coded drumbeats to coordinate troop movements across mountain ranges. In Brooklyn, a kid named Mercy rewired an entire subway tunnel to become one massive amplifier. She played ragecore remixes so loud it shook buildings 5 blocks over. The Vol responded the only way they knew how: force. They deployed silencers, massive machines that emitted frequency null fields. Anything organic within 10 meters felt like their brain was being folded inside out. But even that didn't stop us. We got louder. People started attaching sirens to bicycles and riding them in circles around outposts. Resistance DJs popped up in sewers, bouncing pirate signals across broken cities. Every scream, every beat, every anthem. It wasn't just noise. It was identity. We were telling them something. We're still here. We're still us. And in the middle of it all, Red. She didn't die in Black Point. You know that. But what you don't know is how she came back. Not like a hero, like a shadow. She didn't lead anymore. She whispered. She taught. She moved through camps like a ghost in a blood-stained hoodie, showing people how to build, how to fight, how to scream without making a sound. And everywhere she went, people started singing again, humming under their breath, tapping rhythms on rubble. Noise. Beautiful, defiant, human noise. The Vol never understood it. Why we kept singing while dying. Why we danced in bombed out buildings. Why we screamed when it gave away our position. They saw it as waste. We saw it as weaponry. Because silence, to them, was control. But to us, silence was death. So we sang. We danced. We roared. Even in chains. Even under guns. Even with ash in our mouths and blood in our eyes. We made sure they never had a quiet moment again. And in the spaces between their commands, between their orders and their executions, you could hear us, tapping, chanting, laughing, wailing, like thunder under the floorboards, like the world holding its breath, and then exhaling. Because here's the truth about humans. We were never designed to go out in silence. We were born noisy, born messy, born to make an absolute goddamn racket. And that noise? It's not just survival. It's resistance. It's a love letter written in screaming in song. It's everything we are, spat into the face of annihilation with a grin. So if the Vol wanted peace, they should have picked a different species. There's no blueprint for surviving the end of the world. No neat little guide that tells you how to outlive alien conquest with duct tape, caffeine, and the collective rage of a species. But if there was, Chapter 1 would probably say, don't go quiet. Chapter 2, bleed loud. We were months into the occupation by now. Time got weird. The sun still rose, but somehow it felt like it apologized when it did. People didn't count days anymore. They counted how many drones passed overhead, how many silences they'd shattered, how many friends didn't come back. The world felt cracked, not broken, just off. But humans are weird. We adapt to the off. We build rhythm in chaos. This story doesn't start with heroes or explosions. It starts with a woman in a wheelchair and a paintbrush. Her name was Safa. She lived in what used to be Beirut, now called Zone Black by the Vol, marked uninhabitable, unstable, and under permanent surveillance. A dead city, only it wasn't dead. Safa had survived the initial waves, then the chemical fallout, then a direct pulse strike that left her paralyzed from the waist down. She couldn't fight with guns, so she fought with color. Every night, when the drones passed and the scanners blinked green, Safa would roll herself out of a cracked basement beneath the remains of a bookstore, and she would paint. Walls, ceilings, sidewalks didn't matter. One mural at a time, she covered the gray ruin with life again. Fists and flames, stars blooming out of skulls, faces of people the world forgot, now 10 feet tall and blazing with light. And always in the corner, 3 red slashes, the mark of the living. Some said her murals burned even brighter after a Vol strike, like the walls were defying death itself. The Vol didn't understand. They didn't get art, not like we do. To them, it was waste, useless, a flicker in the void. To us, it was a scream you could hang on a wall. And people started listening. One night, someone snapped a photo of Safa's mural on an old Polaroid. That photo made its way to Cairo. From there, it was copied onto flyers, and those flyers traveled on foot, in backpacks, sewn into jackets, passed in handshakes and hugs and silent nods. By the time it reached the shattered remains of New York, those slashes had become a rallying cry. That's when Ash showed up. Yeah, that was his name. Nobody knew if it was a nickname or just what he'd become after watching his brother burn alive in a vol purge outside Manila. Ash didn't talk much, but he could fight. And he'd been watching Safa's murals pop up across every continent like nerve endings. So he found her, rolled into her busted bookstore, stood quiet for a long time, then said one thing: "We can turn this into war." What happened next wasn't flashy. It was graffiti crews in Detroit getting walkie signals from sculptors in Istanbul. It was an old DJ in Rio remixing resistance speeches over street performance beats. It was a network of artists, painters, welders, poets, dancers, coming together under one rule: make noise with your hands. They called themselves the Iron Chorus. They didn't march. They didn't shoot. They performed. The Vol would find entire neighborhoods lit up with ultraviolet murals that shorted out scanner drones, statues made of junk that disguised real weapon caches, flash mob funeral dances in front of supply convoys. Once, in Venice, the Iron Chorus built a floating stage, rolled out a piano, and played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata on a river of fire while resistance boats zipped underneath. And then came Nova. She wasn't a soldier. She was a ballerina. But when the world ended, she didn't hang up her shoes. She set them on fire. Literally. Nova coated her point shoes in flint and steel. Every time she spun, sparks flew. Every kick lit up the floor beneath her. And in the center of crumbling cities, with Vol patrols watching, she danced. Sometimes for 2 minutes, sometimes for 20, always with fire. The last time she danced was in Berlin, in the middle of a bombed-out opera house. She lit herself on fire and kept spinning. The Vol didn't fire. They just watched. And when she collapsed in smoke and ash, the entire block rose up and tore through them like wolves. Art became weapon. Movement became message. Color became code. The Iron Chorus taught us how to fight with beauty. Taught us that rebellion didn't have to be a bullet. Sometimes it could be a sparkler in a graveyard. But let me be clear. This wasn't peace. It wasn't sunshine and poetry. There was blood, plenty of it. The Vol retaliated. They hunted anyone with pain under their nails. They raided studios. They burned murals. They sent silencers into public performances and crushed dancers mid-spin. And still, more kept coming. Kids, parents, elders. Everyone became a brushstroke in the war. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about leaving scars. Not the kind that fade. The kind that sing. And the Vol? They didn't know what to do with it. They were built for soldiers, for structure, for cold, hard calculation, not for a species that bled bright and died dancing. They started second-guessing targets, pulled back from cities with too much music, adjusted algorithms to avoid creative unpredictability zones. You know what that means? We made the chaos hurt, and somewhere in the mess of it all, Safa kept painting. Even when her lungs collapsed from smoke inhalation, even when she lost 3 fingers in a bombing, even when they found her final mural, a human eye the size of a building, looking straight into the sky, and tore it down the next morning. She painted again that night. Same mural, bigger. There's no happy ending here. Not yet. But here's the thing about humans. We don't wait for the happy ending to start fighting for it. So if you ever find yourself in one of those broken cities, stepping over rubble, hearing silence ring too loud, look for the slashes. 3 red marks. Look for the sparks in the dust. The colors under the grime. That's us. Screaming without words. Bleeding loud. And making damn sure the galaxy hears it. There's a sound the sky makes when it gives up on you. Not thunder. Not silence either. It's this low, aching hum. Like the atmosphere itself is grieving. Like the clouds are watching something they can't stop. That's what it sounded like the day the satellites fell. One by one. Dozens. Hundreds. Each a tiny speck of metal and memory tumbling down in fire. The world didn't end that day. It just stopped being connected. We called it the blanking. And if you ask 3 different survivors what it felt like, you'll get 3 different answers. Some say it was peaceful. No notifications. No pings. No endless stream of bad news chewing through your soul. Others say it was terrifying. Like someone had taken the brain out of the planet. But for the resistance, the blanking was a gift. A chaotic, brutal, beautiful gift. Because the Vol didn't just kill our satellites. They killed their own surveillance net. And that meant, for the first time since they came, we had blind spots. The first team to notice was buried somewhere under the ruins of old Nairobi. A squad of engineers turned rebels who went by the call sign Proteus. Small crew, 7 people, mostly techies, not frontline fighters. But Proteus had something nobody else did. They had Nadia. Now, Nadia wasn't flashy. She didn't wear body armor or paint her face with war stripes. She had thick glasses, a raspy voice from too much underground smoke, and a brain that ran faster than most CPUs. Her specialty? Maps. Not just maps of places, but maps of patterns. Power use, drone flight arcs, vol movement clusters. She could look at static and hear music. And that morning, when the skies blanked, Nadia blinked at her screen, frowned, and whispered, "We just got lucky," or "they just screwed up." Either way, she called it. A 2-minute surveillance gap in the southern exclusion belt. 2 minutes. That's all. Most people wouldn't risk anything on 2 minutes. Proteus risked everything. They'd been watching an old orbital uplink station, rusting away in the Sudanese highlands. Pre-invasion tech, dead since the vol scorched the grid. But something in Nadia's pattern maps said otherwise. It was still drawing power from somewhere. So they geared up, grabbed what they had: half-charged rifles, 2 working compads, 1 jeep with more rust than engine, and made for the uplink station. And what they found, it shouldn't have been there. A signal, faint, choppy, ancient, but definitely human. Old Earth broadcast code, pre-digital, analog pulses on loop. If you're hearing this, Earth is not alone. Repeat, Earth is not alone, over and over, like a ghost trying to call home. That's when the mission changed. No longer recon. Now it was extraction. The uplink was guarded. Of course it was. The vol didn't leave anything with a heartbeat unmonitored for long, especially something pinging out across the void. Proteus only had minutes, so they did what humans do best when cornered. They got weird. One member, Miguel, an old sound engineer, rigged a sonic spike using parts from a busted speaker and his own tooth fillings. It dropped the nearest vol drone with a shriek so loud it made the walls bleed dust. Tara, the team's mechanic, hotwired the jeep into a decoy bomb, drove it straight into the line of sight, and let it burn. The rest went in through a side hatch, crawling on bellies through rat nests and decades of dirt. They reached the core uplink with 47 seconds to spare. And Nadia? She didn't upload data. She broadcasted. Wideband, open frequency, shot a pulse straight into deep space, piggybacking on the old network. No encryption, no safety, just pure, screaming signal. We are here. We are still here. If anyone's listening, please answer. She didn't expect a response. Hell, she didn't even expect to survive the next 5 minutes. But the message went out, and the stars heard it. Nobody knows who answered. Some say it was an old Earth colony, forgotten in the bureaucracy of war. Some say it was the Martian diaspora, those who fled long before the first fall ship ever cracked the clouds. Some believe it wasn't human at all. But 2 weeks later, in the dead of night, a Vol patrol ship in orbit vanished. No wreckage, no explosion, just gone. And the very next morning, scattered across 10 different cities, strange symbols appeared on walls overnight. Not in Vol script, not in any known language, just curves, spirals, light etched into concrete like sunburn. And Nadia? She smiled for the first time in months, because she recognized the pattern. Hope didn't arrive with a roar. It arrived like a whisper in a hurricane, but it was enough. Enough to get us moving again. Proteus became a legend, not because they killed the enemy, but because they spoke. They reminded the universe we still had a voice. And that voice, it got louder. Other resistance groups followed. The Iron Chorus started embedding symbols into their murals. The Ashborn encoded coordinates into street poetry. Red herself returned for a single transmission, her first in months. One line: "We are not waiting to be rescued, but we are not alone." That message? It lit bonfires on every continent. We weren't just fighting anymore. We were signaling, sending beacons into the dark. Because somewhere, someone was listening. And maybe, just maybe, they'd come. Or maybe not. Maybe it was just us. But even then, that's the thing about humans. We don't need certainty to try. We don't need guarantees to believe. The Vol tightened control after that. They knew something had slipped. They blacked out sectors, cut power to everything, started ripping uplink stations straight out of the ground. They even hunted Proteus hard. Half the team was lost in the mountains of the moon, ambushed by a drop team that used terrain like knives. Only Nadia and Tara made it back. But they didn't stop. They never stopped. They just kept sending signals, one burst at a time, into the sky that had forgotten us, until it remembered. Because that's the thing about sky. You can't hold it. You can't own it. You can only fill it with fire, with sound, with the truth of who you are. And we are the species that yells back into the dark, that builds antennae out of bones and broken dreams, that screams into the void and dares it to scream back. The Vol thought they'd erased our voices. What they didn't realize is, we don't need to be heard by them. We just need to be heard by each other. You know that feeling when you're deep in the fight, knees shaking, lungs burning, and suddenly, the enemy hesitates? Just for a second. It's like watching a wolf pause mid-lunge, not because it's tired, but because for the first time, it's scared. That's what happened at Fallbridge. For the first time in the war, the monsters blinked, and we broke them. Fallbridge wasn't a fortress. It wasn't even a real bridge anymore. Just a collapsed highway on the edge of a flood basin in what used to be the Carolinas. Busted concrete, metal teeth rising from water like broken bones. But to the resistance, it was a holdout, a crucial checkpoint for east-west smuggling runs. Ammo, fuel, food, people. So when the Vol sent a purge host after it, we knew they weren't playing around. Purge hosts don't negotiate, don't interrogate. They land, sweep, clean, they erase. There were 42 of us at Fallbridge that morning. Most of us weren't soldiers. One medic with shaking hands. A mother who used to teach second grade. 3 teenagers who still wore headphones around their necks, even though music was a death sentence in surveillance zones. And Jackson. God, Jackson was something else. He used to be a fireman, built like a brick wall, eyes that carried too much sleep and not enough softness. He didn't talk about what he'd lost. We could tell it was everything. But when he moved, people followed. Not because he barked orders, but because he looked like the kind of man who'd rather burn with you than run without you. The purge host arrived at dusk. No warning, just a bone-shaking whump as their crawler dropped into the basin. A 30-ton armored shell bristling with weapons and that cold, bluish glow we all hated. Then came the infantry, not drones, living Vol, the ones built for slaughter. 8 feet tall, armor like obsidian. For arms, 2 mouths, no mercy. And behind them, silencers. Yeah, those. They moved like smoke. No footsteps, no voices, just that hum that made your teeth ache before you even saw them. Jackson didn't blink. He handed out positions, gave each kid a job, kept his voice steady, like he was reading bedtime stories, not preparing children to die. The plan was simple. Bleed them until they pause, then hit where they least expect. It wasn't a plan for victory. It was a plan for impact. We set the basin walls with old oil drums, filled with slurry explosives and shrapnel, stuff banned before the Vol even arrived. Jackson called it poor man's thunder. When the purge host moved into range, we set them off. The night lit up. Fireballs, screams, dust in our lungs and blood in our mouths. We didn't wait. We ran into that fire. Because humans, we don't always survive, but we always charge. The first wave cost us 20 people. Too fast, too strong. The Vol tore through our lines like wolves through wet paper. But then, something snapped. One of the teenagers, Zoe, barely 17, jumped onto the back of a Vol enforcer, jammed a flare into its neck seam, and wrote it down as it exploded. The Vol stumbled, not from the explosion, from shock. They didn't expect us to fight like that. Not with our bodies, not with our rage. They hesitated. And that's when we broke them. Jackson led the charge, a sledgehammer in one hand, a home-welded spike in the other. He didn't roar, didn't scream. He just moved, like a force of nature, punching straight through Vol formations and dragging others with him. The silencers moved in next, figures flickering in and out like shadows burned into film. But we'd learned. We'd adapted. Old Earth tech. Sound traps tuned to disrupt their field cloaks. Feedback bombs made from guitar amps and scavenged radios. We turned music into a weapon. And when the feedback hit, the silencers screamed. First time we'd ever heard them make noise. And God, it was beautiful. Hours blurred. We bled. We cried. We held. It wasn't strategy anymore. It was raw, human chaos. By dawn, the basin was a charred mess. Black water, twisted steel, a sky that didn't dare shine yet. Only 11 of us left. Jackson was on his knees, hands covered in ash and something darker. But we'd done it. We'd held. The Vol crawler, still there, still powered. But it didn't move. They didn't send reinforcements. They didn't push forward. They just stopped, like they were recalculating, rethinking, afraid. And in that silence, Jackson did something I'll never forget. He walked up to the crawler, alone, and slammed his bloody handprint on the hole. Didn't say a word, just left the mark. A message, carved in skin and soot. We're still here. Later, someone took a photo of it. That image went global. It's everywhere now, spray painted on walls, stitched into jackets, tattooed on arms. A red handprint on black metal. The day humanity made a machine second-guess its orders. Fall Bridge became legend, but not because we won, because we reminded the monsters they could break. And when they break, they bleed, just like us. You see, the Vol thought they understood war. They studied our history, memorized our tactics. What they never understood, what they couldn't compute, was what we become when we have nothing left to lose. Not soldiers, not martyrs. Fire. We become fire, and fire doesn't surrender. So if you ever stand on cracked concrete, feel the wind in your teeth, and wonder how the hell you're still breathing, remember Fallbridge. Remember the red hand. And remember, even monsters can break. You ever see something so big, so furious, that the air forgets how to breathe? That's what it felt like. The day the fire marched. Not an actual fire. No wildfire tearing across the hills. No napalm raining down from broken jets. No. This was different. This was a fire made of people, of boots and fists and screams and defiance. A human fire, walking, together, straight into the mouth of hell. The spark? It started in Ruinside, what used to be downtown St. Louis. The Vol had turned it into a processing grid, a cold, steel maze of scanners and sorting stations. Civilians were tagged, scanned, cataloged like insects. If you had anything useful, knowledge, skills, even a rare blood type, they kept you. If not, well, no one ever walked out the other side. One morning, someone leaked a photo. It was grainy, faded. You could barely make it out. But it showed a boy, maybe 7, staring dead on into a Vol surveillance lens, holding up a broken plastic toy. Smiling, just smiling. No context, no caption. But that image traveled fast. It wasn't propaganda. It was a mirror. We saw our own kids in that smile. Our little brothers, our lost daughters, our stolen futures. And something inside us snapped. It started with a whisper, then a chant, then a roar. By nightfall, it wasn't just one cell marching. It was thousands. They came from every direction. Old soldiers, ex-farmers, drummers and street kids, and moms with bandanas over their faces. They didn't wait for permission. No leader gave the order. It just happened, like something ancient waking up. Somewhere, someone lit a flare, then another, and then the fire moved. It was the largest human push since the war began. Not a military op, not a tactical move, just humanity, storming toward the heart of a Vol slaughterhouse with nothing but scraps and fury. And they called it the Ember March. At first, the Vol didn't respond. They thought it was a protest. Then it grew. Roadblocks stopped working. Drones overloaded trying to track the mass. And by the time the Vol realized this wasn't a riot, it was too late. Red was there. She hadn't planned to be. She was passing through, heading west with a wounded team, low on supplies, lower on luck. But when she saw the march, when she felt the thunder in the ground, she didn't hesitate. She turned her crew around, limping, bleeding, half dead, and joined the fire. They marched with drums made of barrels, banging out war rhythms stolen from every corner of Earth. They wore armor made of scrap metal and football pads. They painted their faces like myths and screamed like it was their birthright. And the Vol? They met the fire with machines, Walker tanks, pulse rifles, sonic cutters, weapons designed to erase. But the thing about fire is, you can't erase it, not without getting burned yourself. The first wave of Vol units opened fire outside Jefferson Bridge. It should have stopped the march cold. Rows of people dropped, smoke rose, screams filled the air. But the march didn't stop. It surged, because grief fuels anger, and anger knows no brakes. A mechanic from Tulsa jumped onto a crawler and jammed a crowbar into its hatch, took 3 bullets to the chest and kept climbing. Kids threw rocks at Pulse turrets like it was a schoolyard brawl. An old woman lobbed Molotovs from a walker with a prosthetic arm and no fear. The fire learned. With every body that fell, 5 more rushed in. And in the chaos, the unexpected happened. The walls fell. Not metaphorically, literally. A section of the processing grid, walls 3 stories high, collapsed under the weight of sheer pressure. Bodies, fire, explosions. It was too much. The Vol scrambled, and the march broke through. Inside, hell, steel floors slick with oil, and something worse. Chains, restraint tables, rooms built for sorting people like parts on an assembly line. But there were survivors, dozens of them, and when they saw the fire coming, they wept. not from fear, from recognition. There's a sound people make when they realize they aren't alone. It's not cheering, not joy. It's more primal, like breath coming back into lungs that had been holding it for too long, like blood starting to move again. And that sound? That's what shook the grid more than the bombs did. The Vol retreated that night. Not everywhere, not forever, but they pulled back, burned the rest of the facility, scrambled signals, disappeared into the dark like rats in rain. They didn't want to hold the ruins anymore. Too many ghosts, too many stories in the walls. We buried our dead in a circle around the collapsed grid. No coffins, just names, painted, tattooed, carved into broken helmets and bits of concrete. The living sang them into legend. And the world? The world noticed. The Ember March went viral, not on screens. We didn't have those anymore, but in whispers, songs, murals, fire dances. People who'd been quiet for too long started standing up. Marches sparked across Europe, Asia, what was left of the Americas. Each one different, each one carrying the rhythm of the first. The fire was moving now, not just as a symbol, as a strategy. We stopped waiting for orders. We became the storm, and that scared the hell out of the Vol, because they could crush an army, but they couldn't stop an idea, not one born in blood, and certainly not one carried by millions with nothing left to fear. They started changing tactics. No more soft control, no more assimilation. They switched to full-scale suppression, wiped entire towns off maps, dropped purge units on refugee caravans, burned fields, poisoned rivers, tried to drown the fire in silence. But the thing about silence is we'd conquered it. We'd made noise our weapon. And now, even their silence sounded like retreat. I remember one night, days after the march, walking through the rubble of the grid, chart signs, bent rails, the scent of smoke soaked into the bones of the ground. And there, spray painted in red across a shattered wall. You can't process a soul. That was it. No name, no group, just a truth, left behind like a torch in the dark. That's what the march became. Not a battle, a revelation. We weren't fighting to win anymore. We were fighting to remind ourselves what it meant to be human. To march, even knowing you might fall. To burn, not to destroy, but to illuminate. They say legends are born from blood and memory. Well, the Ember March was both. There's a moment near the end of every war when the world feels like it's holding its breath, like the sky's waiting for someone, anyone, to break the silence. For us, that moment came on a battlefield we never wanted to fight on. The ash fields. The ash fields were a wasteland on the edge of everything left alive. Once, it was farmland. Rolling green hills, golden wheat, old stone fences. Now, it was just ash, black, biting ash, blowing in the wind like the ghosts of everything we lost. But the ash fields were ours, not because we owned the land, but because that's where the fire never died, where the last stand happened, where humanity refused to vanish quietly. The Vol called it the end zone. They sent their best. An army built to snuff out the last flickers of human resistance. Steel giants with weapons calibrated to kill everything except the air. Troops in armor designed to erase pain and fear. And behind them, the machines. Silent, cold, perfect. We had less than 1,000 people. No fancy weapons. No air support. No hope that made sense on paper. Just grit. Just stubborn, roaring, bleeding hearts. Jackson was back. Battered, broken, but unbowed. He gathered us under a sky that refused to cry. He didn't promise victory. He didn't promise glory. He promised this. If we're going down, we're going down loud. We're going down human. We dug trenches in the ash, built walls from bones and rust. We painted our faces with ash and blood and fire. And then, the fight began. The first wave hit like a storm. Metal screamed against metal. Bullets tore through flesh. The air filled with 1,000 different cries, pain, rage, hope. But every time the Vol surged, we pushed back. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't clean. It was war. There was mercy. She was 18, but moved like a ghost on the battlefield, fast, silent, deadly. She saved a kid trapped under rubble with one hand while firing a rifle with the other. She laughed in the face of death and made sure everyone heard it. There was Samir, a father of 3 who didn't think he had fight left in him. Until the last hour, when he threw himself into a group of Vol soldiers to buy time for his squad. There was Red, the Whisperer, the one who taught us how to scream without words. She moved through the chaos like a shadow, rallying broken souls and sewing them back into a force. We were flames, flickering, but fierce. Hours bled into days. We held the ash fields because losing them meant losing everything. Because here, in the dirt and ash, we found what no machine could ever crush. Our humanity. On the third night, something shifted. The Vol commander, a towering brute known only as Korak, led a charge. It was brutal, pure muscle and metal. He tore through our lines like a tidal wave. And then he met Jackson, two forces crashing. Jackson with his spike and fire in his eyes. Korak with his armor and fury. The battle wasn't loud. It was a slow, grinding silence filled with pain and grit. Until Jackson's spike found its mark. Korak fell, and something in the Vol lines faltered. Like when a chain breaks and the rest just snap. We pushed. We surged. The fire spread. At dawn, the ash fields were ours. The Vol retreated, not because we were stronger, because we were louder, because we bled loud. And in the aftermath, we didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because war takes. It steals voices, tears families, burns futures. But it also leaves echoes. Those echoes are us. The kids who never stopped singing. The mothers who never stopped fighting. The poets who turned rubble into hymns. The fighters who became legends. We rebuild on ash. We painted hope over ruin. We made noise louder than any machine. Because that's what humanity does. We survive. We fight. We bleed. And above all, we never, ever go quietly. So when you hear the wind howl through a broken city, when you see a single red handprint on black metal, when you feel the echo of a song rising from the ruins, remember, that's the noise we make. The noise that never dies. The noise that says, humanity, F yeah, asterisk asterisk.